What's up guys, this is Pink Across. Today I'm going to be talking about the effect Tera has had on Gen 9 team building. This is not necessarily an attack on Tera, nor am I stating what I think we should do about it, but I do think Tera has hurt Gen 9 team building significantly, and I'd like to talk about why. So the first point to consider is power level. Generally, a team building metagame is a lot more restrictive and difficult to build in when the top tier threats are difficult to manage. And we have never had top tier threats like those in Gen 9. I mean, Roaring Moon with Dragon Dance, knockoff acrobatics, and then this nasty last slot where it can run Brick Break, Taunt, Roost, Earthquake. It's absolutely nasty. Gouging Fire with this unbelievable physical bulk, and the ability to Tera into something. It can use your Great Tusk as a setup fodder, which is absolutely nonsense. Choice Specs Tera Ice Curam leads to a bunch of pressure being applied to your team as well. I don't need to tell you guys what Volcarona King Gambit do. Superior, of course, with Tera Blast. This should be substitute, but this is basically, these threats are so difficult to handle that the amount of pressure your team has to deal with this in the builder when you're trying to consider all of these threats is immense, which means you need to have a lot of Pokemon on your team that check a lot of boxes. You need to have something. You can't just have a Pokemon that is your breaker. It needs to be your breaker and maybe it has priority as well. Or it's your breaker and it's also your speed controller. It can set Stealth Rock, because trying to fit things onto your team that you need, like removal, like hazards, like offensive pressure, and still answer these monsters in the tier is an extremely difficult task. And what that means is every single slot on your team needs to be doing a lot of different things, and that's not what lower tier Pokemon do. So this means this is why you've seen a lot of teams with 6 OU Pokemon almost all the time, because when you have these lower tier Pokemon, they don't fulfill a lot of slots. They have a niche, usually. They're very, very good in specific situations, and they do something unique, but you can't afford to run that anymore. You need to have everything on your team be working double shifts so you don't get ruined by a Roaring Moon and a Gouging Fire. So those Pokemon where you used to be rewarded for your creativity, for thinking outside the box and picking something anti-meta, doesn't work anymore because you can't pick something anti-meta. You need something that can fulfill a ton of different roles. And if you try to run something a little different that can fulfill a role or do something you think is good, it might be effective, but then you probably end up finding yourself getting swept by something, or your team will have other issues. The second problem posed by Tera is the inherent unpredictability that's added to a lot of situations. So OU Pokemon often function better than lower tier Pokemon in unpredictable situations. And what do I mean by this? Well, a lot of the time, the Pokemon on your team are not going to be dealing with exactly what they thought they would. They're going to be taking hits from Pokemon they weren't specifically prepared for, and that's okay when you have really good stats. But lower tier, more niche Pokemon are typically a lot lower in the stat department, and they really need a specific situation that they're prepared for, or certain Pokemon that they're designed to go up against. That's why even when a tier is really thriving and full of lower tier and more unique and creative Pokemon, you usually only run 1 or 2 on a team, because if you have a full team of these so-called, creative Pokemon, you're going to end up having just low base stats, and unexpected situations will be really difficult for your team to handle. But when you have a Pokemon in OU, it's got good stats in so many areas, it got such powerful attacks that it can cover an unexpected situation better. And in previous generations, what does unexpected mean? Well, that could be anything from your opponent using a weird set or a unique Pokemon, or maybe even something just like a critical hit that can happen in a game sometimes. It's just good to have higher stats for those things. But Tera adds this inherent inconsistency to every single interaction. Kind of like, imagine using a Choice Specs Keldeo to take out this Kingambit. Well, that situation has become very unpredictable. Now, if you expect them to Tera, well, then suddenly your Vacuum Wave doesn't work anymore. You're not going to kill the Kingambit. And what would be better in that situation is if you just had a Pokemon that could hit Kingambit so hard that you didn't need to worry about whether it Tera'd or not. And that's the kind of situation that makes niches kind of evaporate. So to summarize, I think the OU tier has gotten a lot less diverse, and you see teams that are just 6 OU Pokemon, mainly because, one, the top tier threats are so incredibly difficult to answer that you need to have a full team of Pokemon that check a ridiculous amount of boxes, which niche Pokemon don't often do, and because of the increased unpredictability in the tier, a lot of those niche roles and specific situations in which Pokemon used to do well in have vanished. Now, there are other reasons for this beyond what I mentioned. There are reasons we don't see as many niche lower tier Pokemon running around like you do in Generation 8 or Generation 3. So that one thing I do want to talk about is move pool deletions, and specifically the move Toxic. You know, it used to be if a Pokemon was a bit weak and had certain things in the tier that could wall it could at least poison them, which made a lot of lower tier Pokemon that normally wouldn't be good able to thrive with Toxic, and that became a much more exclusive move. You see they've kind of only given it to poison types, whereas if you look in Generation 8, let's just take a look here, you will see the insane amount of Pokemon that get Toxic, and it's really, a lot of people were glad because, you know, Toxic, they say it's an annoying move. Well, I honestly think Toxic was a really, really healthy move that helped a lot of lower tier Pokemon work that otherwise may not have. So you see basically everything here has got Toxic. So yeah, move pool deletions are part of it, and it's more than just Toxic. There are other moves. Certain Pokemon lost Recovery, lost Knockoff. My boy Lantern lost Heal Bell. You know, there are a lot of changes that were made that hurt in that sense. One other thing I want to discuss is just power creep in general. You know, I can't blame Tera entirely for things like Roaring Moon and Gouging Fire. These guys would put pressure on the tier even if Tera didn't exist. It's simply that Tera exacerbates that problem greatly. And one other thing I want to mention, I've been talking about how Tera has killed diversity, and I think that is true. I think it has in the tier. The one exception to that, though, is hyper offense. So just because of how incredibly strong these abusers are, putting these guys on a hyper offense team, you can afford to run some weird stuff on HO, and it has made it more interesting to build. It's made it more interesting to play. So while every other play style has been hurt significantly by Tera, but I will say hyper offense seems to have weathered it fairly well, and you can still get along with running some weirder stuff on hyper offense. So that is one potential benefit. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know this isn't as polished and edited as normal, and I will definitely be getting back to making those more edited, those more polished videos soon. Life has been a bit crazy lately, but I hope you guys are enjoying the content nonetheless, and I would really appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'll see you guys next time.